start the recording and then the broadcast. Thanks.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, I'm Holly Carr with the U.S. Department of Energy's Better Buildings Initiative. Happy New Year to everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the January edition of the Better Buildings webinar series. In this series, we profile the best practices of Better Buildings Challenge and Alliance partners and other organizations working to improve energy efficiency in buildings. Next slide, please. There we go. Today we will uncover a hidden treasure of energy efficiency opportunity in warehouses and distribution centers. As online sales increase, distribution centers and warehouses are gaining prominence in building portfolios. From 2003 to 2012, warehouse floor space in the United States grew from approximately 10 billion square feet to approximately 13 billion square feet. That makes warehouses and DCs the second largest building type by square footage in the U.S. behind commercial office space, which comprises nearly 16 billion square feet of space in the United States. And refrigerated warehouses are the real energy hogs, using an average of over 250 kBTU per square foot per year compared to 184 kBTU per square foot per year for commercial office space. So you can see that this is an important place for us to be looking at energy efficiency opportunities. So let's move to the next slide and we'll introduce our panelists for today. All of these speakers have focused on warehouses and distribution centers either in their own corporate portfolios or in client work and are here to share their learnings with you today. So first off, we'll hear from Bob Valere. Bob is the Director of Energy and Environmental Services for Better Buildings Challenge partner Staples. Bob has an impressive background over the past 25 years in energy management. His role at Staples is to lead the Comprehensive Energy Management Initiative, which is a key component of Staples' sustainability program. Bob's responsibility expands to over 2,000 retail stores, 250 distribution centers, major data centers, and 3 corporate offices. Today, Bob will be describing Staples' Eco Treasure Hunt program in distribution centers. Second, we'll hear from Kirk Myers. Kirk is the Senior Sustainability Manager for REI, Recreational Equipment Incorporated. REI is a specialty outdoor retailer headquartered near Seattle. Kirk works to develop and implement sustainable business strategies that drive efficiency, innovation, and environmental benefit across REI's footprint. And today, Kirk will be talking specifically about REI's new Zero Energy Distribution Center recently opened in Arizona. So we'll have some suggestions for existing DCs, suggestions for new construction of distribution centers and warehouses, and then finally, helping us tackle the refrigerated warehouse energy use is Alan Moran. Alan is a senior project engineer with Cascade Energy, which is an engineering firm specializing in industrial energy efficiency. Since 2007, Alan has completed over 400 projects and led over 60 facility retro commissionings at industrial sites. He's worked with customers in industries including food processing, cold storage, wood products, oil and gas production, and chemical production. Alan will provide a sneak peek to highlight new on-site refrigerated warehouse training that Cascade is developing with DOE. That training will be available this spring, and so we hope to get some interest amongst our audience today, and perhaps folks would like to learn more about applying for that in-plant training. So thank you all very much for being with us today. Let's move on to the next slide. So before we hear from our panelists, I just want to remind you quickly that we will hold questions until near the end of the hour. Please send in your questions through the chat box on your webinar screen, which is on the right-hand side control panel there on your webinar screen. We will try to get to as many of those questions as we can during the Q&A period. This session will also be archived, both the slides and the audio, and posted to the Better Building Solutions Center for your reference later. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Valaire. Bob, can you tell us what Staples is doing in your existing distribution centers?
So thank you, Holly. And you can go to the next slide. Next slide as well. So I really want to give you a little background in what led us to, when you look at distribution centers and retails, just to show that Staples in 25 countries, the fact with 96,000 employees, the number 3 e-retailer, the fact that we have over 1,800 stores in North America, and over 200 distribution centers. So next slide, please. So as we start to talk about what led us, a lot of times it's all about the journey and then building a portfolio to allow us to step in, because a lot of, on the retail sectors, a lot of energy managers only manage the retail stores and not their distribution network, which was very interesting that we saw. But what allowed us to build that credibility and allowed us to set the tone on how we manage our energy and led us into treasure hunts, that when we started adding EMS systems, it became a green partner and started doing sustainability commitments, reducing our carbon footprint. We really had to be able to measure our portfolio, and adding green technologies and, partnering with EPA and Better Buildings Challenge, and then taking on Europe and LEED certification. So it started to get pretty complex on the way we manage our energy, and it was really, we talk about the journey. So if you could turn the next slide, please. We really joined different programs, and there's some timelines to say, starting the EPA partner for 6 consecutive years, now 9 certified buildings. One of the interesting things is to think that, here we built energy efficient buildings, not only for our retail stores, but our distribution centers. We built them pretty efficient out of the gate. And when we looked at our baseline, the fact that it started as a 48 and now is a 63, that's in the millions of dollars, achieving that 75 level, to say we're really doing a good job in managing our portfolio. And we benchmark all of our sites. So what's interesting is, if you go to the next slide, please, is when you look at our channel, not only about distribution centers, our retail stores, and the products that we sell, is energy efficiency. So it's going to carry a theme, and when I get into different things around the treasure hunt, all this will come into play. Next slide, please. See, so I started doing the programs. We're involved in a lot of stuff with the Better Buildings and the Better Buildings Challenge, and actually did a case study that you go on the website, and you can see our Capel site as a case study. We started in Orlando and different things that would happen. So next slide, please. So this really gets into the nooks and the crannies to talk about, although we still focus on retail, we put a lot of emphasis on the non-retail. So what we saw was, we can really tell you how energy is being used. So for example, if I look at the lighting, whether it be in a retail store, lighting is 28 to 33%. HVA is anywhere from 38 to 43. Copy center is 13, plug loads 10, miscellaneous. The days of looking at energy from your bill is archaic. We're using data analytics information to help us drive efficiency real time. When you look at 1 million square feet, or actually some of our distribution centers on the retail are 1 million square feet in size. So imagine 17 miles of conveyor, over 300 forklifts, 250 loading dock doors, air compressors, lighting, all kinds of controls, pretty standard, not air conditioning. But when you look at how energy is being used in the square footage, there's a lot of focus on a distribution center. A non-retail space. It was really a big focus and allowed us to step into the next opportunity. So getting into, next slide, please. So what we decided to do is really to partner with energy champions in each of our distribution centers. Because think of these sites that are run 24/7, almost 360 days a year, 3 shifts, 24 that these folks work. So we really needed somebody to be an energy champion on that. We started to develop these webinars so that when we started to measure the performance and do the program, it was important to let them know how they ranked as an Energy Star facility, were they best in class, what can they do to improve the efficiencies at these buildings. And then we shopped around seasonality, using big-ass fans to be able to move air and purge the building. We put together some educational and training material, both only for new hires, but also ongoing, because we wanted to engage the associates on how to be able to drive that. And what we did was, our first treasure hunt, if you go to the next slide, please, we really started, and our first one was probably close to 10 years now. We went to Orlando, and I think one of the things that I want to share is, you hear from corporate, we brought together a team of experts, both lighting, HVAC, conveyor people, fork truck, air compressors, communication, education. We actually went to a facility and brought a team and partnered with the facilities and the operations team. In the beginning, one of the challenges were people get very defensive that we're coming into their house and kind of trying to find fault. It was really coming in and partnering with the people to be able to say, hey, how can we help you? How can we make a better program, get the money to do the opportunities and things that you share? So as you can see from the slide, to really engage all the associates. And what we do is do an employee rally, because when they see people walking around the home office or the distribution, they get nervous to say, what's going on? Why are these people here? It's really to get them engaged. And we actually do an employee rally, and we give away gift cards to the employees to come up with the best energy savings idea. Because they always felt that, I work second shift or third shift, I never really see anybody, nobody really pays attention to some of the ideas we have. What we found is they came up to say, hey, these lights were left on, nobody's here, but the section of the conveyor section is running. Next slide, please. So I think what we did is, when we started to partner with these teams, we'd show up on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon and walk this with the facility, and would kind of see if the facility was gone quiet, to make sure that we looked at the old building, and they knew we were coming. So we really walked the facility and took a look at some of the opportunities, looked at the space temperature, really brainstormed, regrouped as teams, because we've had a lighting team, an HVAC team, a conveyor team, and really shared practices. How does things go? We really started to brainstorm on opportunities to look at, how does the building start up? How does it shut down? Why do you turn things on the way you do? And what we found is, sometimes some of the fallout was the facility said, well, I get in early after the weekend when it's shut down, and I'd throw everything on to get the building up and running. What we realized, by putting all the conveyors on with the flick of 2 switches, he was starting to peak his load first thing in the morning, and didn't realize the savings that he was, or the money that he was incurring, the savings that he could have. For example, we're not perfect, and here's a clear example. In the truck washing bay, which was 40,000 square feet, we retrofitted at the time with T8 lighting with motion sensors, 28 watt. We look up in the middle of the bay, and there were 4, HIDs still plugged in. I remember looking at it, my contract said, Paul, how did we miss that? And he goes, geez, I don't know, I'll have to check with Chris. And Alan pipes up, oh no, we weren't sure of the new technology when you were installing it, so we wanted to be safe. So when you guys left, we went back into the dumpster, took out a couple, plugged them in. Here we are 2 years later after we did that project. The facilities thought they were doing the right thing, but we didn't do a good enough job of education and training the team. So it was really around working with the folks and letting them know that we really could make a difference. So when we finalized, walk the building, come back with the ideas, we start crunching numbers. And we worked with the teams to show that, hey, we're really going to make this a real project. So next slide, please. So after that, on Monday, when we kind of walk, we arrive with the teams at the startup. We measure all the equipment. We put data loggers in. We validate everything. We look at the utility bills over the last 6 months, 12 months, understand. We kind of regroup during the course of the day, have people get up and talk about the projects, what they found. We do a lunch rally, in the morning. We do one in the evening, and we do one in the middle of the night. So we want to make sure that we touch all the employees, and at the end of the day, we're able to share those results back if you go to the last slide, please. We actually share, we get in there early Tuesday, put together all the analysis, and we do a report out, in front of the team, and then after that, the final report out is to management. So when we walk away on Tuesday, we're able to share with the organization that we're going to make these enhancements. We're going to ask for this amount of money. So we have the buy-in from management prior to going down and say, when we walk out, these become real jobs. We don't just walk away. We stay with them for the next 12 months when things are implemented. We put up on the bulletin board, we share the great ideas, and the people who won the gift certificates, we show them that, hey, it's made a difference. One of the things right out of the gate, just by being there, we saw anywhere between a 2 and a 4% just in drop in energy efficiencies just by educating the associates. That's without doing anything. We're actually been able to achieve anywhere between 21 and 24% energy savings on top of the building that was energy efficient. Next slide. So when we walk away, this is kind of some of the things that we do with the program and get the commitment from all the employees and the engagements. And at the time, we actually do some school kids while we're down at that facility. So if we're down in Hagerstown, Maryland, or Portland, Oregon, we actually go out to the store with Inspector Watson and kind of promote some of the programs. So I know I went through a lot very quickly, but that's kind of our program. If you can, next slide. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob.
You're welcome.
I love that that you guys visit schools as part of the schedule for these across the country. It sounds like a fun job.
It's about giving back, and one of the things we've learned is, as good as our kids are honest and they ask some really heart-wrenching questions, so it's humbling.
Yeah. And another key aspect to this that you mentioned, but I think is very significant and doesn't always happen with a lot of retrofit attempts, and that is to secure the funding before you even step foot on one of these distribution center sites for a treasure hunt, that that facility has the funds ready to go to make those changes, and that you stick with them until the implementation is complete. So.
Yeah, I think that's key. One of the things is having the finance people behind you so that you make these real jobs, because people say, I've heard this before, it's not a real job. Yep, we'll get the funding, and then it gets put on hold for next year. Yep,
yep. Great, well, thanks very much. We'll move on over to Kirk out in Seattle. And I guess, Kirk, you can start implementing these treasure hunts in your new distribution center in Arizona in 6 months to a year from now. But for the moment, let's talk about the distribution center design and how you all went through the process to actually build a zero energy distribution center.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, good afternoon all, and thanks, Holly. Excited to share a little bit quickly about what we did in designing a new distribution center. As mentioned earlier, I focus on REI's sustainability strategy, which really comes down to the simple question of what should be better in the world as REI grows and thrives. And then I focus a lot on our core practices, which are the day-to-day decisions we make around energy, climate, green building, and the other areas of resource use that we want to make sure align in our operations with our actual values of how we respect the outdoors. So I'll share some details on this distribution center that opened this last summer just outside of Phoenix in Goodyear, Arizona. Talk a little bit about our goals, our process. And I think I really enjoyed in Bob's talk about the process and how critical that is in his treasure hunt. We found the process and design was really key for us also. Talk a bit about efficiency measures, what worked, what didn't, and then share some ideas about what might be successful for other distribution centers. Quickly, talking a little bit about the background of REI, we were founded in 1938 up here in Seattle as a member-owned cooperative, so we actually are not a publicly traded company. We're owned by our members, and we're, of course, focused on getting people into the outdoors. We're at a bit of a different scale than, say, a Staples. We are proud that we have about 150 stores, 6.5 million active members, and we sell about $2.5 billion of outdoor and camping gear each year. I'm hoping that some of you here on the webinar are enthusiastic members, but that's the only unabashed sales pitch I'll make here. But as we were looking at our new distribution center talking about scale, we had 2 existing distribution centers, and this one that we built was our 3rd. So next slide, please. So back in 2012, our logistics leadership started looking at expanding this network from the 2 DCs I mentioned to 3, and I was able to take advantage of a great program, the EDF Climate Corps program, to bring in a summer fellow to assess the technical and financial feasibility of setting a net zero energy goal for this building. And our fellow took our 2 existing distribution centers, one in Washington, one in Pennsylvania, and modeled them as if they were in the Southwest, just to see how our existing operations might perform. We knew this new building would be about 400,000 square feet in, somewhere in the Southwest, a hot, arid climate. At the time, our Climate Corps fellow concluded that net zero was likely technically possible. That is, we could squeeze enough efficiency out of the building to fit enough solar on the roof to power the building on an annual basis. And she also assessed that there was a decent financial return. Both good news. And led us to our other aspirations. Our Pennsylvania distribution center was one of the first LEED certified distribution centers in 2007 when it opened. And so because of this and the analysis, our CFO was comfortable kind of holding the tension and setting the net zero and LEED goal that is a minimum target, sustainability target, to guide us through the design process. Why do we focus on energy? Of course, all of us on this call have some hand in that. And for us, it comes down to not only the business benefits, but also because of the impacts of climate change and energy usage on the outdoor places our members love to recreate. And in that same vein, I'll mention on the call here a bit about our thinking on water, just because in the Southwest, water is as locally important, I'd say, as climate, if not more so, just because it's such an arid region. So a couple other notes about our design. For us, we added an additional level of complexity to achieve our goals in that we were looking to build a roboticized material handling system that would add a lot of roboticized shuttles to actually move product throughout the building that would use a significant amount of energy, but would also increase the efficiency and throughput of the building. And then finally, people, as a company that's been ranked on Fortune's 100 Best Companies to Work For, we always focus on the employee experience. Not only do we want a building that shares our love of the outdoors and inspires our employees, but for example, we also condition our DCs to ensure employee comfort. And for us, cool weather Seattleites thinking about Arizona, that was especially important, but has large impacts on energy use and HVAC design. So all this was the setup that these priorities led us to our goals, our owners' requirements, and kicked off the design process. And I'm sure with many folks who build distribution centers, our logistics team had a short timeline. It was 13 months from the start of design to when we anticipated initial occupancy, and they chose the design build process to be able to execute against that. Next slide, please. So talking about process, we took an integrated design approach, which brought together all the parties in a multi-day design shred process. So this includes the general contractor, developer, mechanical, electrical engineers, architects, solar vendor, green building consultants, energy modelers, outside experts, all supported by the experts at the Rocky Mountain Institute. And in this design shed really focused on 3 main targets to optimize our outcome and our impact. So we wanted to maximize the total cost of ownership. We wanted to save time in the process in that 13-month window by avoiding potential road bumps and potholes by dealing with them early. And one beautiful impact of setting a net zero goal is that the financial decision point for us between investing in efficiency in the building, in our 4 walls, and the solar that's on the roof became crystal clear. Anything that was a better return than the solar was something we invested on efficiency. And so this shift from a linear process to kind of multiple parallel processes allowed us to also understand how one decision that might be made, say the choice of conveyor technology or some other equipment within the building, could change the waste heat loss coming off of it, influence the HVAC sizing, and how all these different variables were connected for us. We dealt very, very strongly in a recommendation for me is, the fundamentals of building shape and orientation are pretty straightforward, but if you don't deal with those early on, you can get some negative impacts later on that you really can't solve if you've oriented the building in a way that doesn't help on the energy efficiency side. So what in terms of sustainability efficiency, what did we choose to implement? We'll go to the next slide here. And from the net zero energy perspective, the integrated design process led to significant efficiency improvements within the building, and we ended up installing a 2.2 megawatt solar array that on an annual basis produces all the energy that the building consumes, and we're actually trending a bit better than that. This one solar array actually more than doubles the other 26 arrays that we have spread throughout our retail stores. The big win here also is that we look at this as a long-term investment. So this solar array provides us essentially, after we pay for it, about 20 years of free energy. We also hit LEED Platinum, so we beat our LEED Gold goal. We're thinking really about the total impact of the ecosystem, and that obviously LEED has a strong overlap with energy efficiencies. That helped us in terms of our net zero goal also. And then, as I mentioned, water conservation. We made an interesting choice to not use an indirect or a direct evaporative cooling system and actually use mechanical chilling, very high efficiency, but mechanical chilling that is less efficient than, say, an indirect system. Because of this impact on water, we knew we had some extra space on the roof because of the design that we were tackling. And the way that we did it, that we could actually avoid those millions of gallons of water consumption instead of Southwest by making this decision that counterintuitively use a bit more energy. Next slide, please. The SHRED process led us to actually 57 different potential energy efficiency measures that we processed through, ran through the energy model and assessed. The basics, optimizing orientation, envelope, insulation, was really due to the extensive energy modeling that we did. Some things that we didn't do actually were we looked at a direct current microgrid, which is very cutting edge technology where you could actually run loads directly off the solar array. And we looked at even things like putting in some subgrade earth tubes to pre-cool the cooling air coming in. Neither of those worked out. They were a little bit too cutting edge for where we were at a couple of years ago, but as technology changes, I think some of those are much more feasible now. Our focus was, really fundamentally on the insulation, right-sizing the HVAC, reducing kind of the oversizing that sometimes happens with different systems to make when there's some uncertainty. By having everyone focused and aligned on the energy model, we were able to really optimize, make sure that we didn't accidentally oversize stuff. And when it came down to the fundamentals mattered, the insulation, the orientation, the envelope, the right sizing, and optimizing of the needed systems, and really understanding the loads and heat loss. One note for us was that the energy modeling was very different than what we've done in the past, where we're used to doing it for a retail store or a headquarters building. DCs are variable production buildings, and so that business demand and that business throughput has a huge impact on the energy. It took us quite a bit of effort to figure out how to get that right so that we could actually make the decision on sizing the PV array properly. So next slide. So one thing I mentioned water, and I want to make sure that I explain how this connects. Because as we think about energy, there is this kind of concept of embedded water in the energy you take from the grid, and when you're thinking in a whole systems way around sustainability, this is something that's critical, right? A coal-fired power plant or other types of power plants use water for cooling, and so as we were thinking about kind of this bigger picture, like how do we ensure that what we're doing on the energy perspective is not only sustainable, but is sustainable in terms of water for the local ecosystem. And besides the work that we did in the building on water, water urinals, all the standard things you do when you're designing a high efficiency building, that choice around HVAC, and then also thinking about this water project where we had an opportunity to actually put water back in the Verde River in a partnership with Bonneville Environmental Foundation and the Nature Conservancy of Arizona. In the watershed, essentially above our building, and so a really innovative program that we're really proud of for a couple of reasons. One is because it showed that whole systems impact, and our members care about water as much as they do about energy, as well as the fact that USGBC, the organization behind LEED, actually through the process was able to recognize these water restoration certificates for LEED points that allows other folks to take advantage of these opportunities in addition to the work that they do on energy. Next slide, please. So kind of in summary, as I mentioned also about people you can see in the top photo here, we're really proud of how the building looks and feels. I mean, it is something that is brand right for us. It helps our employees, even when they're going to their regular day job, think about the outdoors and connect. This bottom right-hand corner here photo is of a hyperchair. And so a very innovative thing that we did was actually put in individually heated and controlled chairs for the office area, which allows us to essentially relax the set points and at the same time let our building operators know that their occupants can be comfortable, right? You can dial in what level of cooling or heating you might need individually to make sure that you're always comfortable. Small thing, but a cool thing that that eventually I think gets that thought of how do we make sure that we focus on conditioning people and not the spaces. Yeah, so next slide. We ended up, the building opened up this summer, and it is so far progressing very well, actually ahead of our net zero, our zero energy goals. And we did just recently get the LEED Platinum certification that I mentioned. So we believe that we were able to build the largest DC that is LEED Platinum certified and net zero energy in the country. With that, I'll hand it back to Holly and look for questions as we finish up the webinar.
Great, thank you so much, Kirk. This is such a great example of walking the talk for REI, both on the energy and the waterfront. So very exciting. We do have a number of questions that have already come in for both of our speakers, so I encourage folks to just keep sending those in through the chat window, and we should have a good chunk of time here at the end to address many of those questions. So finally, I'd like to move to our third presenter, Alan Moran at Cascade Energy, and Alan will specifically address refrigerated warehouses and give us a sneak peek into some of the training materials that they are developing to help organizations reduce energy use specifically in these refrigerated facilities. So I will turn it over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Holly. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, we won't be able to make everyone online an expert in refrigerated warehouse energy efficiency in the next 10 minutes, but hopefully we can get some interest for a new refrigeration in-plant training offering from Better Plants program. Next slide, please. And so I work at Cascade Energy. We provide industrial energy efficiency consulting in a number of different industrial sectors, but we've spent a lot of time looking at industrial refrigeration systems, and so we've got a lot of experience helping customers reduce their energy spend on their refrigeration system. Next slide, please. So just a couple of quick, basically rough energy estimates for refrigerated storage. Between public refrigerated warehouses and food service and grocery distribution centers, we're looking at about 1,300 average megawatts of energy usage per year, which results in about $800 million on electricity bills annually. Next slide, please. So we're spending a lot of money on electricity with these refrigerated warehouses. You know, in the past, as long as the maintenance staff and the refrigeration operators kept basically the ammonia or Freon or whatever refrigerant inside the pipes and kept everybody safe and kept the refrigerated spaces cold, you know, their job was done. But you know, in the last 10 to 15 years, saving energy has become a higher priority, and so that's something that's been added to typically the refrigeration operator and maintenance staff's plates, and so that's where we hope that some training in some of these energy efficiency principles and maintenance best practices will really help this sector reduce its energy spend. Next slide, please. And so where does your energy go? Unfortunately, we don't have the words on this pie chart, but this is basically the energy breakdown of a food distribution center that has some cooler space, some freezer space, and then a dry warehouse. And so the wording's missing for some reason, but oh, there we go. There we go. So we've got, obviously the refrigeration system is our energy hog, right? And it uses about half of the facility energy usage. And then if we're talking about a public refrigerated warehouse that is all freezer space and has blast freezing, that number can be as high as 80%. So that's obviously where we want to start when we talk about reducing our refrigerated storage facilities energy spend. We want to look at the refrigeration system. Next slide, please. And so if we're gonna move forward with saving energy and implement an energy management program, it's crucial that we're tracking our energy performance. We need to know which way our energy usage is trending. And so whatever that may look like, that needs to be done in any successful energy management program. And so I've got, just at a high level, we've got a graph here, and basically all we want to know is we've got the orange line is daily energy usage, and then the blue line is a daily baseline value based off of historical energy data. And so basically this particular facility, they track their energy usage on a daily basis, and then they'll mark when they make changes that should save energy and are directed towards energy efficiency. And so you can see, you know, as they make a couple of changes there, as indicated by the text boxes, those two lines start to diverge. And as an energy efficiency consultant, that's what allows me to sleep at night, when I see those two lines get further and further apart. Next slide, please. And so with the refrigeration system, there are many moving parts that can fail. And so that's where it's really important to have a good preventative maintenance program and staff, you know, that can implement good maintenance best practices. Whether it be you've got, you know, regulators that need to be checked and set appropriately, pressure transducers and temperature sensors that need to be calibrated periodically, evaporator valve groups that need to be exercised and tuned to make sure that we're getting our, you know, peak performance out of our evaporator coils, and then condenser nozzles that need to be cleaned, and condenser water that we need to make sure we've got an appropriate water treatment program so that we're getting our design capacity out of each piece of equipment. And so that's where it's really important to have maintenance staff and refrigeration operators who are trained in these maintenance best practices. Next slide, please. You know, another common opportunity we find, and this is where the operations part of the refrigerated warehouse comes into play, is, you know, keeping the heat out of the refrigerated space. It's simple, but it's an opportunity almost everywhere we go. And so practicing good door closing practices, and then making sure that we're using the automatic capabilities of fast acting doors as well, and not locking those open. Next slide, please. You know, another no-brainer, but it's an opportunity, you know, at a high percentage of the facilities that we go to, is not controlling the refrigeration system at a temperature that's lower than it needs to be. And typically this just requires good communication from facility management and corporate management to the maintenance staff and the refrigeration operators, so that they understand what those corporate specs are and what the contracted temperature set points for the different customers they may have are. Next slide, please. And then when we start to look at the control of the refrigeration system, one of the biggest opportunities we typically see is setting the suction pressures and the condensing pressures on the refrigeration system appropriately. And so when you think about it, compressors typically make up about 70% of your total refrigeration system energy usage. And what we want to do is reduce what we call compressor lift, and basically just make that compressor work less. And so to do that, to reduce the lift, we're talking about either raising the suction pressure on the compressor or reducing the condensing pressure. And so that can typically result in pretty significant energy savings. Next slide, please. Another thing to think about with refrigeration system energy efficiency. Most systems for refrigerated warehouses are designed based off of the highest temperature during the summer in that region, and so that only happens a couple days of the year. Most of the year you're operating at some part load condition, and so it's very important to have to basically efficiently match that refrigeration load with our equipment capacity. And so there are a lot of considerations to take into place. If you've got multiple compressors, how are those compressors sequenced on and off? With our trim compressor, are we using slide valve unloading? Do we have a VSD on that compressor? And then there are many more considerations to think about when we think about how to control the capacity for evaporators and condenser fans. Next slide, please. And so here we got a Venn diagram. We like to visualize, all the different team members at a refrigerated warehouse. And so obviously management, they've got to push this program. They need to provide the resources and the funding for the maintenance staff to attack these efficiency opportunities. Operations, they play a critical role in making sure that we minimize the heat that gets into the space. And then your maintenance staff, your plant engineers, and your refrigeration operators, those are the folks who have the most control on to the different pieces of refrigeration equipment, and then also that they have a good understanding of maintenance best practices. Next slide, please. So fortunately, the Better Plants program, they provide in-plant trainings. And in the past, since 2011, there have been 60 in-plant trainings that have been completed, and these include steam systems, compressed air systems, process heating, pumps and fans. And now they're offering they've got some new offerings, and one of those will be a refrigeration in-plant training. Next slide, please. And so with these refrigeration in-plant trainings, there will be a mix of classroom lectures, breakout groups, brainstorming sessions, to introduce those energy efficiency principles and how they relate to the different pieces of equipment on your refrigeration system. We'll introduce maintenance best practices, and then we'll introduce a couple of analysis tools that facility staff can use to quickly estimate the energy savings magnitude of some of these different opportunities. And then we'll actually do some hands-on equipment checks as a part of the training, so that we're getting some hands-on experience with some of the theoretical principles that we discuss and talk about during the classroom sessions. Next slide, please. And so, these trainings there'll be 3 days on site at a host site, and really anybody who's making decisions about how to control the preventative maintenance program or has their hands on the refrigeration system, it would be worthwhile for their time to participate in these trainings. And then the application process will open later this spring. It'll be, you'll get an email, the partners will get an email with, the typical in-plant training offerings, and refrigeration will be a part of that. So, and then there's also additional information at the link shown here on the slide. With that, thanks for your time, and hopefully we get to work with some of the folks online in the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alan. And folks, if you are listening online and you are not a Better Buildings, Better Plants participant, you can either become one or you could perhaps attend a training that is hosted by one of our Better Plants partners. So don't give up hope if you're not directly related and involved in the Better Buildings and Better Plants programs. Really encourage folks to take advantage of these trainings. They're going to be very strong, and it's on site, so you really get to put your learnings in the classroom right into action. So let's see if we can move to the next slide. And the next slide after that. I think we have, okay, so we have one resource here, which is the Staples Showcase Project, which is the Capel Fulfillment Center in Texas. This is an example of a distribution center in the Staples portfolio that went through the treasure hunt process that Bob described a little earlier. There's also an implementation model that describes that treasure hunt process in great detail and provides some template documents and resources that Staples uses as a part of those events that you are welcome to use as well. We will post that implementation model on this slide so you can go directly to it when we post the entire archive. And there's a third resource that I think is so new that it didn't quite make it onto our slides today, because I think it was completed maybe moments before the session started, and that is the Showcase Project for the REI Distribution Center in Goodyear, Arizona. And that you can go in there and look at the details of the implementation and energy efficiency strategies that were used in that building. Moving on to the next slide, please. All right, so this is our Q&A. I'm just going to go down the line here a little bit, starting with Bob. Can you speak to some of the specific energy reduction strategies that you have employed after one of these treasure hunts? Specifically talking about the major building systems, the conveyors, the forklifts, the lighting, HVAC, any renewables projects that you might be doing, and so forth.
Sure. So on conveyors, you might realize, when you have over 15, 17 miles, there's a lot of motors. So we want to make sure that they're high efficiency motors, the fact that there's the opportunity to put variable speed drives. Then we look at the schedule. Just a simple thing to say when people take breaks or go to lunch, are all the conveyors running, or can some of them be shut down periods of time? So really look at the schedule. Same thing with forklifts. Look at the battery charging equipment to make sure it's a high efficiency charger. Are you charging batteries in off-peak? Is there an opportunity to do that? So we look at the whole strategy around forklifts. Same with lighting. What technology is in there? A lot of times it's simple things that we've gone from HID to T8, T5, LED. We have motion occupancy sensors. So depending on the strategy that's in place today, what is the new technology to add to that? Because what you realize is pretty efficient right out of the gate. We look at same thing as, so if a safe might be already gone from a T8, 32 watt down to a 25 watt, or a T5 that was a 54 down to a 44 watt with the occupancy, with the motion sensor, at what point do you retrofit or upgrade with the lighting? So there's different strategies within that. Same thing with the HVAC, the efficiency, the cleaning, the economizers, all the things of tuning up a piece of equipment, make sure it's running optimally. So we kind of tear apart every one and deploy those different strategies, along with sharing the education with the maintenance team and the service team that works and finishes those. So it varies. And then on renewables, as you saw in Hagerstown on one of those photos, we actually have 3 different solar arrays up to 3.5 megawatts. One was a thin film, one was one on a roof, and another is a rotating. So depending on the opportunities with savings, availability with tax credits in the markets that we can take advantage of that, we deploy that technology, whether it be a fuel cell, battery storage, or solar or wind.
Great. Just a couple of notes on that. You mentioned the lighting upgrades and moving to LED, and we did have a question about the percentage savings that are anticipated by switching from fluorescents to LEDs, and I have a response to that one, which comes from our tech team, our lighting tech team lead for the Better Buildings Alliance, who's Michael Meyer at Pacific Northwest National Labs. And he responds that for type A TLED retrofits, you can expect to see approximately a 29% energy savings on those from the fluorescent baseline. And from type B or C TLEDs, you can expect approximately a 45% energy savings from your fluorescent baseline. So hope that answers a question from one of our participants. And then regarding the conveyor belts, Bob, someone asked how much energy is used per mile of conveyor. With 17 miles of conveyors, it seems like it must be significant. So
it's around 42% of the, yeah, it's around, I don't have per mile, but we do have percentage for the building. So depending on the size of the building, because some buildings have 17, some have 15 and 12, but on average, on 1 million square feet, it's around 17. So it averages around 42 to 45% of the energy for the building, because the fact is it's running, has a lot of motors. That's why we look at making sure with variable speed, can we shut things down when people go to break, lunches, things like that. We have wave overlap, so if the system was full, it circles the product back around the building. From start to finish, it takes 10 minutes to get from a box from point A to point B.
Huh. So definitely a good place to focus on those treasure hunts.
Yes.
Okay. Kirk, a couple questions for you on the, excuse me, folks, I'm going to have to take a drink. On the distribution center, a participant is asking if you can share the design for that distribution center. How do you get to zero?
Great, absolutely, and as Holly mentioned, the showcase project will be up soon. They'll give some more details. The other thing that our team is very open to is having folks tour through. So we've had a number of companies come through and check out what we did. So anyone who's interested in that can contact me through the contact information at the end of the webinar. But we're definitely interested in that, because this ties into potentially another question around repeatability for us on this. We don't build distribution centers very often, so we hope that in terms of our values and our goals for sustainability, that what we've learned here, which some of it's very novel, some of it's fairly straightforward. Other folks can take that information and implement it on their own. So we don't have any desire to keep this secret at all. We want to be open about what we did, what we learned, and what we weren't able to do, so other folks can replicate it and go further.
Fantastic. That's what Better Buildings is all about: sharing information and helping others move the ball down the field. So that's great news. And then yes, that does also address one of the questions we also had for you was, will you do this again, or was it a showcase only? And sounds like not anytime soon, but that this would be a strategy you would try to employ in future DCs. And then a related question is, are there any strategies from the DCs that you might migrate over to new store builds, which you probably have more of?
Yeah, great question, actually. I think, in terms of the word strategies, absolutely, we're looking at this integrated design process and really using that to tune and optimize our store design, particularly on the HVAC side, not only for the climate that it's in, better than we might do today, but also in terms of that, making sure that we are putting in just the right sizing and a system in technology to make to achieve our goals, comfort as well as energy efficiency. Some of the technologies don't translate super well, but the process for sure is something that we've found great value in, are adapting for our retail stores, which we build. And we don't open up a ton, but we open up usually 5 to 7 per year, and that's something that's very present for both our employees and for our members, where they see and they understand how we show up, our values in concrete and brick.
Great. I'm sure everybody wants one of those hyper chairs. So.
they're pretty cool. A lot of folks. It's amazing. Some folks. There are a few folks who will be on heat all the time, even in Arizona, and then most folks are on cool. But there are folks who seem to be perpetually cold. So it makes our operations team very happy to have a solution for them, so that they can get more folks in their comfort range.
Great. Last question I have for you, Kirk, is one about trends in rooftop solar on warehouses and distribution centers, and whether or not you had any specific challenges in promoting rooftop solar. And also a second question in this same ask here about how rooftop solar can protect wildlife and wild places, and if that was a concern or a part of your thought process as you made decisions around solar.
Yeah, great questions. I don't have a perfect view on the trend of solar across all distribution centers, but I do have a good sense that it's especially in areas where there's both good sun as well as good incentives. It's pretty popular in the financing hurdle that people have solved if you don't have the capital to pay for it yourself or don't want to through power purchase agreements is leading to a lot of adoption. I think Bob mentioned, Staples has done quite a bit in this space also. One thing that I didn't mention during the talk also is that I think part of the shred process that is really important. If you look at the photo of the roof of our building, we were very, very specific about where we put our skylights and clustered them in areas where our people would be underneath them, which opened up huge areas of roof for continuous solar installation, which reduced the cost quite a bit. And so I'm pretty proud that if you just look at the building of the roof of our building, you can get a sense for, you actually see tangible kind of outputs of that design shred process and how that played out. But we think so. We do solar on our retail stores and on DCs, and especially at this scale, you can get a very, very low price per watt when you're doing it at this scale, and if you're able to make it so it can be a big open areas for solar.
Great, thank you very much, Alan. A question for you regarding specific percent savings that you see are common in the refrigerated warehouses that are retro-commissioned. Can you give us a ballpark? And we have two related questions here. One is, what are the percent savings from just low and no cost upgrades that are common? And then the second one is, can you provide some typical savings percentages for each of the strategies you described? And I would say maybe not each of the strategies you described, but some that you might know the numbers of.
Sure, two good questions. So to address the first question, that depends, and it's a case-by-case basis, obviously. What's the baseline? What's the starting point of the facility that you begin this process at? And so you've got different levels of experience from operators around the country and different legacy control strategies and maintenance practices. But on average, we're looking at anywhere from 5 to 15% of total facility energy use can be shed from those low cost, no cost opportunities. And that there's some outliers. Sometimes that can be as low as 2 or 3%, which as an energy efficiency engineer, that's tough to work through a big retro commissioning event and only provide a couple percent savings. But then there are also times when we visit facilities and do this process, and we see as much as 20 to 25%. But yeah, on average, 10 to 11% savings seems to be our kind of typical average. And then as far as each, some of the specific opportunities I was describing, there's a lot of interactive effects. And so it's hard to pin down exactly what percentage comes from reducing the condensing pressure and raising the suction pressure, and what comes from doing some type of sensor calibration. And so a lot of times, there will be multiple of these 2 or 3 of these opportunities will have to work together to achieve, a large percentage of savings. For instance, we may have to do some adjustments to a defrost regulator so that we can lower our condensing pressure. Well, adjusting that defrost regulator doesn't really do much to our energy savings, but lowering our condensing pressure could provide a couple percent savings on our total facility energy usage. So I would say typically the larger opportunities come from reducing our compressor lift and then making sure we're implementing efficient part load control strategies for evaporator fans and compressors.
Excellent. Thank you so much. A couple of general questions real quick here. Someone asked about contests between DCs with prizes to see which ones can save the most energy. Excuse me. One sort of contest that comes to mind is the Battle of the Buildings, which Bob Valere mentioned, where participants can enter a portfolio or a subset of buildings and let them compete against each other. And I think that you could do that within your own portfolio and have all of your distribution centers competing with each other, or you could perhaps do that with other organizations as well. So that's one idea. And then of course you can always join better plants and sort of compete with yourself to reduce energy use across your portfolio by 20%. So please consider both of those options as you're looking at your own strategy. And then a second question on the cost for these in-plant trainings that were mentioned for refrigeration. My understanding is that the host organization, there is a cost share request, and then folks can attend those once the cost share is met. Folks can attend those on an invite basis. So I think there'll be more information on exact details of cost in the application that comes out this spring. And with that, let's run to the next slide. So certainly invite you to join us for our next webinar in February, which focuses on paid from savings energy efficiency financing for small organizations and small projects. So this has been out there for quite some time for large projects, larger organizations. So the smaller projects are a bit of a new evolution for this type of financing. You can register at the Better Building Solutions Center or from this link. Next slide, please. And then, of course, our Better Building Summit, which is our big once-a-year gathering of all things and all people better buildings. This year it'll be May 15th through the 17th. Registration for the summit just opened on Monday, so I encourage folks to check that out and get yourself signed up. And next slide, please. All right, this is the moment some of you have been waiting for. Contact information for our presenters. So you can get more information about a zero energy design for your next distribution center. Feel free to reach out to any of our three presenters here, or to me, Holly Carr, if you're interested in DOE programming or participating in Better Buildings activities, and program support from Kendall, Sanderson, and Holt, Mountcastle down there on the bottom. You can always follow us on Twitter and get the latest activities and events happening in Better Buildings. Thank you very, very much to our three presenters for joining us today and sharing so much of your best practice and learning. And thank you very much to the audience for being here as well. Have a good afternoon.